Before we begin, do me a favor. Hit like so this reaches people who actually understand how power works. Subscribe because today's story doesn't end when the video ends. It just changes costumes. And turn on notifications because in politics, the first narrative tends to become the permanent one. Now let's get into it. There are two kinds of people in Washington, those who want answers and those who want control over the questions. Today, you've been handed the Epstein Files, a phrase designed to do one thing, make you believe there's a single vault, a single key, and a single villain guarding it. But power doesn't keep secrets and vaults anymore. It keeps them in process. And before we begin, Epstein's crimes involved real victims. Survivors deserve dignity. Our target today is not them. Our target is what power does with the aftermath. A document dump is the modern politician's confessional, not because it tells you the truth, but because it convinces you someone is being honest enough. The government releases pages, redactions appear, the internet reacts like a starving man spotting breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are not a meal. They're a trail, and trails are meant to lead you somewhere the guide already chose. Here's the trick. The moment you release some documents, you prove three things at once. This is real. There's more. Someone decides what you see. And that third one, that's the one that makes people furious. Because nothing screams trust us like a page that looks like it lost a fight with a Sharpie.
The Department of Justice's handling of the release of the Epstein Files is being questioned by lawmakers and survivors. Chanel Call has more.
The Trump administration remains under scrutiny over the Justice Department's handling of the release of files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Among the thousands of documents initially released for Friday's deadline, CBS News determined at least 15 files were no longer available on the DOJ's website Saturday, including a file with a photo of President Trump that was put back up on the site Sunday. More than 500 pages were fully redacted, and lawmakers who push for this public release are slamming the DOJ.
We want the files out. There's a pretty simple point. Who raped these young girls? Who covered it up? And why are they getting away with it?
The quickest way, and I think most expeditious way to get justice for these victims is to bring inherent contempt against Pam Bondi. And that doesn't require going through the courts.
Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said the removal of the files from the DOJ's initial release has nothing to do with President Trump.
The reason why we are still reviewing documents and still continuing our process is simply that, to protect victims.
Among the files made public in recent days, more photos related to former President Bill Clinton and Britain's former Prince Andrew. Epstein survivors say they want the names of those who preyed upon underage girls to be released.
Are we protecting the survivors, or are we protecting these elite men that need to be put out there?
On social media Sunday, the Attorney General reaffirmed the Justice Department's commitment to bringing charges against anyone involved in the trafficking and exploitation of Epstein's victims. Chanel Call, CBS News, New York.
Let's be grown-ups here. Sometimes redactions are legitimate, protecting victims' identities, private information, and sensitive material. That's not scandal, that's basic decency. But decency in politics is rarely the effect. It's the excuse. Because even a righteous redaction does one thing beautifully. It turns the audience into detectives, and detectives into zealots. Each black bar becomes a Rorschach test. If you already distrust the institution, you see they're protecting the powerful. If you already trust the institution, you see they're protecting the vulnerable. Same ink, different religion. Now watch what happens. The public starts asking the wrong question. Not what does this prove, but what are they hiding? And that is how power wins. without ever persuading you of anything. It simply keeps you busy.
I want to go back to New York. Alex Miller has been sorting through the documents. Alex, what are you seeing?
I just want to note at the top that there is a search function on the website. It does not work. I typed in Ghislaine Maxwell's name. Obviously, she's very relevant to this case as well as some other major figures. None of their names have worked. So I want to go through what we do see. It is a lot of heavily redacted photos here, as well as, here's a great example. A lot of photos, film photos that appear to have been scanned in, and they are redacted. And many of them we do have no context to. We have no idea if these are redacted because these are survivors, which is obviously the main thought here, but we also have no idea if these are just women or people who have been involved that we really have no idea if they are actually to be implicated at all or not. There's also a scrapbook that has been scanned in. If you want to come back to me here, I can show you this a little bit here on the screen. It says on here, once upon a time there was a clueless little girl, and then when you go to the next page, there's multiple pages, it says, and those eyes are blue and the little teeth. We're getting these made so that you can see them a little bit closer now in the future, in the next couple of minutes when we're able to bring these to you, but gives you an idea of some of the stuff. We don't know who made this scrapbook, whether it was made for Jeffrey Epstein or by Jeffrey Epstein, but it documents that trip to Prague that I was just mentioning a couple of minutes ago. We're also still finding more documents of notes that were taken during certain interviews. Another interview with a different survivor that happened here. That interview I'm just reading now for the first time. This interview happened in May of 2019. Remember, Jeffrey Epstein arrested in July of 2019, which means that they continued their investigation because that first interview we were just discussing happened July 31st. He died about 10 days after that interview happened. And so there's still a lot here to be sorting through. And as soon as we find things in here that are relevant, we will bring them to you. But I just want to note that, you know, most of this is redacted to protect their survivors in theory, but according to this law, they need to explain why every single image is redacted, because there could be images in here that are redacted that shouldn't be. And so we need to know exactly why every single image has been redacted. And if it's part of an ongoing investigation, according to this law, they need to remove that redaction once that investigation has been completed.
Then comes the photo controversy. Remove, restore, review, explanation. And whether the explanation is responsible or not, the damage is done. Because the public doesn't evaluate facts, it evaluates vibes. And nothing generates a bad vibe like we took it down, but now it's back. It's not evidence of wrongdoing, but politically, it doesn't need to be. This is the part you must understand. Modern scandal is not built on proof. It's built on procedural inconsistency. You don't have to show people a crime. You only have to show them a process that looks like it has something to protect.
What was released and what was held back has already stoked anger.
We wanted to see it all come forward. You know, President Trump had a real opportunity, the DOJ had a real opportunity here to do the right things.
But it seems the Justice Department has now removed about 16 files with no explanation, including this image where a well-known photograph of Donald and Melania Trump with Jeffrey Epstein is partially visible. Mr. Trump was friends with Epstein for a time before a falling out, but has always denied knowing of his crimes. The most recently released files include a grand jury transcript that details the role of Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. An FBI agent recalled one survivor described Maxwell as like a cool older sister who said this is what grown-ups do. The agent said Maxwell was described as being present or waiting just outside the room as Epstein sexually abused girls at his residences. Many sought-after files remain under lock and key. It's left survivors disheartened and grasping for answers.
It just feels like a prolonged ache that doesn't need to be dragged out. The DOJ has had a lot of time with these documents. I just want answers. And I think that a lot of survivors feel that way.
The lawmakers behind the Transparency Act in Congress are contemplating legal action.
The law requires all unclassified documents related to Epstein to be released. It's obvious they have not met that standard.
The Epstein Files have been a red-hot issue for some of President Trump's voters, and there are many unanswered questions. But the extent to which it could haunt this administration into next year will depend on what's released next.
The White House says it's the most transparent administration in history. It's not clear when the remainder of the documents will be released. Rachel Clayton, ABC News, Washington.
Power is not a morality play, it's an incentive map. So let's map it. Let's start with player one, the institution, or as we know it, Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. The institution's priority is survival, not truth, not catharsis, survival. Survival means comply with demands for release, avoid legal exposure, avoid endangering victims, and avoid creating fresh political fires, which is hard when your very act of transparency is kerosene. So the institution chooses a familiar strategy. Controlled disclosure, enough to claim openness, not enough to lose control. Then there's player two, the Trump administration. The administration's incentive is to neutralize the story, not solve it, neutralize it. That means look transparent, keep allies satisfied, keep headlines contained. And when that fails, when the release creates new controversy, the administration doesn't just lose the narrative, it becomes trapped inside of it. Now enter player three, the opposition. The opposition doesn't need closure, it needs continuity. A scandal that resolves is a scandal that stops paying dividends. But a scandal that never resolves, that's an annuity. In politics, nothing is more valuable than a question you can ask forever. And finally, there's player four, the feed, or as we know it, the algorithm. The only player that doesn't care who wins, as long as you keep watching. The feed rewards certainty, rage, simplicity. Document dumps offer the illusion of complexity, with the emotional payout of certainty. It's not breaking news, it's breaking brains.
Let's bring in Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin in Ireland, and he's joining us from Wicklow. Great to have you on the show. So I want to get your reaction to the way these files have been released, as in it was limited in number and heavily redacted.
What concerns me is that this appears to be more of a cover-up by the Trump camp rather than the transparency and the accountability sought not only by the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and other powerful men, but sought by that legislation that was passed last month, setting the deadline of the release for yesterday. And the reason why I say that is I understand why documents must be redacted. Indeed, I've worked with sensitive documents for decades, and to protect witnesses, to protect victims, to protect vital intelligence sources, yes, you have cause for redactions. I understand why not all the documents could come out yesterday, given how many of them are. But as you just heard from Representative Khanna, there was no explanation given for the extent of the documents released, how many remain to be released. There was no explanation for the redactions, which weren't just protecting witnesses and victims, but in one case, 119 pages of a grand jury document surrounding Epstein's case in New York, for which he was finally convicted. That was entirely blacked out, not a single line released. We have not seen the indictment, the 60-page indictment against Epstein in Florida, which was his first criminal case. We have not seen any of the evidence behind that indictment. What we did see, and what appears to be sort of a targeted PR move by the Trump camp, is a focus on getting photos out, not just simply of famous people against whom there is no evidence were involved with Epstein criminally, but especially photos of Bill Clinton in what appears to be an attempt to divert attention from Trump to his political enemy.
Okay, I want to jump in there now because there's been a lot of pressure on the Trump administration from not only Democrats but also Republicans and, of course, victims to release these files. Is the pressure now going to... Do you see any change there, or do you think the pressure is going to continue on the Trump administration? Is this going to perhaps actually anger people in the way it's being released?
I doubt it. I mean, the history of cover-up attempts is they usually fail. Think of Watergate in the 1970s. Not just simply because of your opponents, because of those within your camp who just simply are not satisfied, who think something's being withheld from him. And so we not only had Democrats criticizing the lack of transparency overnight, we had Republicans who have broken with Trump. The Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who has led the attempt to get the declassification of the files, and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene were among them. I think the story may ebb for a few days, but only because we're going into the Christmas and New Year period in the States. And the paradox is that by attempting to bury the story with this fairly ham-fisted release, the Trump administration probably guarantees that it will remain at the top of the news cycle in early 2026.
Should we expect accountability?
Well, certainly not if the Trump camp can escape it. And let's be honest here. The whole story of what has happened this year has been the attempt not only by Donald Trump to escape any accountability, and we must hasten to add he has not been linked to any criminal activity so far, but the accountability for those men who have been linked to Epstein criminally, according to those who have seen some of the documents. The question of whether we get accountability is really a question of the U.S. system. And that is, after so many attempts to damage it this year, in particular by Trump and his associates, do we get a reliable system at the legislative level and at the level of the legal process where, again, I must emphasize, we get a release of the documents, not because this is a pro or anti-Trump issue, but because for more than 20 years, indeed close to 30 years, there have been victims of Jeffrey Epstein who have had no justice and no closure over this case.
Now, there's still a massive amount of material yet to come. Obviously, sifting through all that material, redacting it, looking at what's in it, what they can release, what they cannot release. What should we expect in the next stages of this release?
I think the battle goes on, which is the ongoing attempt by the Trump camp to stall and to divert, with the attempt by those who want to see the files out to keep pressing this politically by keeping the story live and possibly even using the legal process. I mean, one reminder here, and that is that the Trump administration is in violation of the law. I mean, because the legislation that was adopted by Congress last month is quite clear that all the materials must be released, not just a fraction, not some, but all of them. Quite clearly, all of the documents were not released by the deadline yesterday, and the Trump administration gave no formal explanation as to why they had not complied. So yes, I think the Trump folks are politically and legally vulnerable, and that will continue. The question here is, and you talked about it earlier, how many Trump supporters will finally say enough is enough and peel away from him?
I just want to, one brief question before we go. You said that, so they're in violation of the law there. What consequences then could there be if, in fact, they are, as you're saying, in violation of the law?
Legally, they could be in contempt of Congress. This is congressionally mandated. So, for example, you could see a case being brought against Attorney General Pam Bondi. There have been calls for the impeachment of Trump officials, including Bondi. I don't think we see either of those scenarios for the next few weeks because I think, there's a lot more to play out here in terms of how far the Trump administration might stall. But I will point to you to one thing that I think highlighted how nasty this could get politically. As they attempted to cover up the documents and divert attention to Bill Clinton, the Trump administration's Justice Department spokesman went on social media last night and said, oh, look, here's a photo of Bill Clinton next to a victim. Now, I must hasten to add, the photo of Bill Clinton did not show him next to a victim. There's no evidence to suggest that. There's no context to suggest that. But for the Trump administration official to say that really tells you the lengths they are going to go to try to protect their man in the White House. And I hasten to add, to protect those who were associated with Jeffrey Epstein in criminal activities, not in social activities.
All right, Scott, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for your analysis this morning. That's Professor Scott Lucas from University College Dublin in Ireland. Thank you.
You want to be dangerous? Don't become a partisan. Become an analyst of incentives. Here's your 5-question test. What kind of document is there? Court exhibits, investigative note, a contact list, a mention is not a verdict. Does it prove a claim or just create a feeling? A name in a file can mean anything from met once to investigated to involved. Treat it accordingly. What's redacted and what rule is being used? Consistency matters more than the redaction itself. Who benefits from you being furious today? If your outrage is predictable, it's probably profitable. What would change your mind? If the answer is nothing, you're not investigating, you're auditioning. And power loves an audition. The crimes were real. The damage was real. The survivors are real. And they deserve protection, always. When institutions release information in fragments, they don't just manage facts, they manage public attention. In the old days, a cover-up was a locked door. Today, it's an open door leading into a maze. If you enjoyed watching Power do what Power does, quietly, efficiently, and without remorse, then you already know what comes next. Like this video so the algorithm understands you're not here for noise, you're here for strategy. Subscribe because the next episode will make today's headlines look like stage props. And turn on notifications because in politics, timing isn't everything, it's the only thing.